The door to the stairwell hadn't finished closing before Dr. Roland Veld's hand locked around Zola Asante's wrist. Not a grab, a clamp. The kind that rotates on impact and sends a message before a single word is spoken. Her shoulder hit the concrete wall hard. The back of her head snapped against it. For one suspended second, the fluorescent light above them strobed white across her vision. Then it cleared. And Veld was right there, 6 inches from her face. 61 years old, silver-haired, carrying the kind of institutional authority that makes men believe walls are optional. His jaw was tight. His eyes were flat. His hand had not loosened. "Whatever you think you found," he said, "unfind it." Zola did not move, not because she couldn't, because she was deciding. Her wrist was still twisted in his grip, her shoulder blade pressing concrete, the sound of the gala muffled and indifferent on the other side of the door. Her mind was running fast and clean underneath the fear, cataloging the pain, measuring the distance to the door, registering the 2 research assistants she'd seen on the landing above who had gone completely, deliberately silent. She looked at Veld, straight into the flat authority of his eyes. "Let go of my arm," she said. He held for 3 more seconds, long enough to make sure she understood the hierarchy. Then he released her, straightened his cuffs, and walked back through the door into the warm noise of the gala like he'd stepped out for air. Zola stood in the stairwell alone. Her wrist was already bruising. Her shoulder throbbed with a deep, structural ache. She pressed her back against the wall and breathed. Once, twice, a 3rd time. Then she straightened her blazer, smoothed her dress, checked her earpiece, and walked back in. She was back at her station in 45 seconds, coordinating caterers, briefing the institute director. Her face gave nothing. Her hands were steady. Nobody in that room could have told you anything. Had happened. Nobody except the man standing near the far window with a glass of something untouched in his hand. Shin Jae-won had watched her go into that stairwell. He had watched Veld follow her. He had watched the door close and registered, with the particular precision of a man who had spent 15 years reading rooms, that the angle was wrong. The body language was wrong. The 2 research assistants drifting away from the landing above was very wrong. He had not moved, not immediately. He had stayed exactly where he was, weight balanced, expression neutral, and watched the door. When Zola came back through it alone, he clocked the adjustment in her shoulder. The way she held her right wrist fractionally higher than her left. The single extra beat she took before her face rearranged into composure. Most people in that room saw a woman returning from a brief errand. Jae-won saw a woman absorbing damage and deciding what to do with it in real time. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to the man standing 2 feet behind his left shoulder. "The building's security system," he said quietly. "I want the stairwell footage from tonight. All of it. Every camera in this institute from the moment this event started." "How far back do you want it pulled?" "Everything from the past 6 hours. Back it up somewhere the institute can't reach." "Tonight? Now." The man moved. Jae-won raised his untouched drink to his mouth. His eyes traveled back across the room to where Zola Asante was laughing at something a board member's husband had said, her face open and warm, and giving nothing away. He watched her for another 40 seconds. Then he set his glass down on the nearest surface and did not pick it up again. He stayed, shook hands, said precisely enough. He was Shin Jae-won in public, measured, magnetic, the kind of man who made other powerful men want his approval without understanding why. But before he crossed toward the exit, his phone buzzed. Once, he glanced at it, set it face down, and for just a moment, his eyes found Veld across the crowd, and held. Veld didn't notice. That would prove to be his first mistake. Before he left, he passed close to the edge of the room, where Zola was finalizing the evening's last logistics. He didn't stop. He didn't speak to her. She didn't look up. But in the elevator on the way down, he pulled out his phone, and looked at the photograph his man had already sent. A still from the stairwell camera. Veld's hand on her wrist, her shoulder against the wall, her face. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he forwarded it to his lead investigator with 4 words. Find everything on Veld. He walked out of the building into the Washington night. His car was waiting. The city was doing its ordinary late evening things. Traffic, voices, the particular energy of a capital that never fully sleeps. Shin Jae-won got in. The door closed. The city moved past the window. He said nothing for the entire ride, but his jaw was set in the way it only set when he had already made a decision and was simply waiting for the world to catch up to it. Inside the institute, Zola Asante finished her last checklist, thanked the catering team by name, and walked to her car in the parking structure alone. She sat in the driver's seat for 4 minutes without starting the engine. Her wrist had darkened to a deep, unmistakable bruise. She photographed it with her phone. Clinical, deliberate. Then she started the car and drove home. She did not know about the footage already backed up on 3 servers. She did not know the name, Shin Jae-won. Not yet. She did not know that a man she had never spoken to had watched her walk out of that stairwell and made a decision that was about to change the entire shape of what came next. All she knew tonight was this. Roland Veld had put his hands on her because she had found something. And whatever he was trying to protect was bigger than his ego. She intended to find out exactly what it was. She just didn't know she wouldn't be doing it alone. Zola Asante has spent her entire career being the most capable person in the room and the last one credited. She has watched men like Roland Veld move through the world with impunity, and she has stayed because the work mattered, and she refused to let their smallness drive her out of it. But tonight, a man grabbed her wrist and drove her into a wall and told her to forget what she found. What did she find that made him that dangerous? Who is Shin Jae-won, and why does a man who operates in shadows care what happens to her? And when these 2 worlds collide, what does it cost them both? Because what's coming isn't just a fight for her career, it's a fight for her life. And the man who just stepped in isn't the kind who steps back out. If this opening already has your pulse up, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Hit like, subscribe, and don't move. This story is just getting started. Roland Veld filed his complaint 48 hours after the gala. Zola read it across a desk from Deputy Director Harmon, whose expression had been carefully arranged into something between sympathy and professional distance. She read it with the particular stillness of someone taking inventory of a wound. It was thorough. She had to give him that. The document described a pattern, volatility, unfounded accusations, an escalating hostility toward senior leadership that had, according to Veld's account, come to a head in the stairwell. When Zola had cornered him and become, the word he used was, unmanageable. She set the document on the desk. He grabbed my wrist, she said, twisted it, drove my shoulder into a concrete wall. I have photographs of the bruising taken the same night. Harmon's expression shifted by a fraction. We take all allegations very seriously. I'd like to see the stairwell footage. A pause, just long enough to mean something. There appear to be some technical issues with the stairwell camera from that evening. The words landed in the room like something calculated to land softly and land hard at the same time. Zola looked at her, kept her voice even and clean. Technical issues. The team is reviewing it. Deputy Director Harmon. She folded her hands on the desk. I submitted an audit flag to the board 3 days before this gala identifying a significant discrepancy in the federal grant disbursements for the Meridian Research Project. That flag has been de-escalated and removed from the active review queue. Dr. Veld's complaint against me was filed 48 hours after I submitted it. And now the stairwell footage from the night he put his hands on me has technical issues. She held the woman's gaze. I want that noted in writing. Harmon picked up her pen. Her hand was not entirely steady. Effective immediately, she said, You're on administrative leave pending investigation. Zola drove home in silence. She sat in her apartment and looked at her wrist. The bruise had yellowed at the edges, still visible, still undeniable. She had documented it. She had witnesses. 2 research assistants who had been on that landing, who had seen everything, and who had since that night been professionally unreachable. She understood the machine. She had watched it run before, from the outside, and had told herself she was too careful, too thorough, too documented to ever be caught under it. The machine did not care about thorough. Her phone buzzed. Nadia, she answered on the second ring. Talk to me, Nadia said. Administrative leave. The footage has technical issues. His complaint says I cornered him. The silence on Nadia's end was the specific silence of a woman exercising extraordinary restraint. I'm coming over, Nadia said. Nadia arrived 40 minutes later with jollof rice and the particular energy of a woman who had spent 6 years as a paralegal watching institutions protect themselves and had long since stopped being surprised by any of it. She listened to the full account without interrupting. Then she sat back. They moved fast, she said. He's been doing this a long time. The audit flag, what did you find? Disbursement irregularities going back at least 2 cycles. Vendor authorizations that don't match procurement records. Small enough to look like administrative error until you line them up. Nadia set her fork down. If he's been running something through those grants and you found the edge of it, this isn't just about the assault. He's protecting something much larger than his reputation. I know. The leave isn't punishment, it's containment. The word sat between them. The settlement offer came this morning, Zola said. Before HR even finished the meeting. A number. An NDA. A resignation. Nadia was quiet for a moment. That's a serious number. He put his hands on me, Nadia, in a stairwell, in front of witnesses who looked away. And now I'm sitting at home while he's in that building operating like nothing happened. Her voice was level, completely level, which was how Nadia knew exactly how deep it was running. If I sign that NDA, I take the money and the silence, and I let him keep running whatever he's running with federal money. I spend the rest of my career knowing I did that. Nadia picked her fork back up. Okay, she said simply. Okay? I never thought you were going to sign it. She pointed the fork. We need a lawyer, not your union rep. A real one. I have someone in mind. I just need to make one call first. She was in her home office, pulling together every piece of documentation she had, the audit flag, the bruise photographs, the timeline, when her phone rang from an unknown number. She let it ring. It rang again. On the 4th call, something made her answer. Ms. Asante. The voice was male, low, Korean in its foundation, but carrying the particular smoothness of someone long at home in powerful rooms. I was at the gala 2 nights ago. Her hand went still on the desk. I have something that belongs to you. 41 seconds of footage from the Institute stairwell. Your shoulder against the wall. His hand on your wrist. The 2 research assistants on the landing above who saw everything and chose to see nothing. A pause. Backed up on 3 servers the Institute cannot access. The room was very quiet. Who are you? She asked. Someone who was in the right position to see what happened. That's not an answer. No, he said. It isn't. She sat down slowly. What do you want? The pause before he answered was thoughtful, like he was choosing the most precise version of the truth. Nothing from you. Nobody backs up footage and calls a stranger for nothing. What happened to you was wrong. The people trying to bury it are making a mistake. A quieter pause. I don't like it when people make that kind of mistake. Something in that last sentence made the fine hair on her arms rise, not fear, recognition. The understanding that this man did not use words carelessly, and that mistake was doing a great deal of work in that sentence. If I need the footage, she said carefully, how do I reach you? You won't need to. I'll know when you need it." The line went quiet. She searched for major donors at the Institute's annual gala, found his name in 4 minutes. Shin Jae-won. She had heard that name before, not from news articles, from the silence that surrounded it, from the way a colleague's voice had dropped at a dinner party when someone mentioned the warehouse situation on 14th and K. From the look on a federal prosecutor's face in a documentary she'd half-watched 2 years ago, the look of a man describing something he could prove and couldn't touch. The man who had just called her was not a philanthropist donor. He was the most dangerous man in Washington. Her hands were not entirely steady when she picked up her phone again, but she dialed. Park Soo-yeon was a small Korean woman in her mid-40s who wore reading glasses like a surgeon wore a scalpel, as an instrument, not an accessory. Her handshake was the kind that ended negotiations. She listened to Zola's full account without moving. When Zola finished, Soo-yeon took off her glasses and polished them slowly with a cloth from her desk drawer. "Tell me about the footage," she said. Zola told her. Soo-yeon's eyes sharpened. "And this person has it secured on servers the Institute cannot access." That's what he said. "And this person is Shin Jae-won." She said the name the way people said it when they wanted to make sure the name was the actual thing being discussed, and not a misunderstanding. "Yes." Soo-yeon set her glasses back on her face and looked at Zola for a long moment. Something passed across her expression. A precise, professional concern with something older and more personal underneath it. "I've known his name for 11 years, she said. "In that time I have watched him make decisions that served his interests with a consistency that is almost architectural. He does not do things without a reason. He does not extend resources without a calculation." She leaned forward slightly. "He told you he wanted nothing?" "Yes." "Men like him always want something. The question is not whether there's a reason. The question is whether what he wants in the long run is something you can live with." Zola held her gaze. "You're telling me that accepting his help puts me in his orbit, and his orbit has consequences I may not be able to predict or control. I'm telling you to go in with full information." Zola was quiet for a moment. She thought about the settlement offer on her kitchen table, the number and the silence it was buying. She thought about Veld's hand on her wrist. She thought about what Nadia had said. Whatever he's protecting is bigger than his reputation. "Here's what I know," Zola said. "I have a bruised wrist, a de-escalated audit flag, a fabricated complaint, and footage the Institute has already tampered with. What I don't have is time." She met Soo-yeon's eyes. He has the footage, he has the resources, and whatever his reason is, he chose to use both of them for me. A beat. "I'll deal with the orbit. Right now I need to deal with Veld." Soo-yeon studied her for another moment. Then the corner of her mouth moved. Small. Precise. The expression of a woman who had spent 30 years in rooms full of people who underestimated what they were looking at. "All right," she said. She picked up her pen. "Let's talk about what it takes to bring this institute to its knees legally." That night, Zola sent a message to the number that had called her. 4 words. "I'm not signing anything." The response came back in under a minute. "Good. Don't." Then a second message. "There's a lawyer. Park Soo-yeon. She's the best in the city. Tell her Shin Jae-won sent you." Zola looked at the screen, typed back, "I already called her." A longer pause. Then, "You move fast." She set the phone face down on the desk. Outside her window, Washington carried on in the dark. Sirens somewhere, traffic, the muffled pulse of a city that had buried bigger things than one woman's career and called it Tuesday. Zola Asante opened her laptop. She pulled up the audit records she had saved before the flag was de-escalated. She began, methodically and without hurry, to build the case herself. She did not need rescuing. She needed the tools. And for the first time since she'd sat in that parking structure watching her wrist bruise in real time, Something in her chest that had been locked down tight began, slowly, to release. Not hope, exactly. Something more durable than hope. The certainty that she was not doing this alone. But Zola Asante has no idea what Roland Veld is about to do next. Because Veld is not just protecting his reputation, he is protecting 4 years of federal fraud. And Zola found the edge of it without even knowing what she was looking at. When he realizes she isn't taking the settlement, he stops playing defense. What he builds next isn't a complaint. It's a criminal case. And it has Zola's name on it. The federal filing arrived on a Thursday. Soo-yeon called at 6:43 in the morning. Soo-yeon did not make early calls for ordinary problems. I need you in my office at 9. Don't stop anywhere. Don't speak to anyone from the Institute. What happened? Veld's team filed a criminal complaint last night. They're alleging you've been redirecting federal grant disbursements through a shell vendor account for the past 14 months. Her voice was flat. The tone of a woman delivering a diagnosis. Forged signatures, fabricated vendor records, a financial trail built with considerable skill. The room tilted. Zola sat on the edge of her bed. How much? Just under $400,000. That money doesn't exist? I have never touched those accounts outside my operational mandate. I know that. A beat. Someone built this carefully. Over time. This was already being constructed when you turned down the settlement. A pause. Which means the settlement was never about the assault. The understanding arrived fully. The NDA wasn't to protect Veld from the assault complaint. It was to stop her from looking further into the grants. They were already building the frame when they offered me the money, Zola said. Yes, if you'd signed, the filing disappears and you're legally silenced. You take the money and never know what was under it. Zola stood, walked to the window. 9 o'clock, she said. She arrived at 8:52. Soo-yeon was already at the head of the table, 3 folders open, glasses on. Shin Jae-won was already seated to her right. Zola stopped in the doorway. She had prepared for this, rehearsed the composure, reminded herself exactly who he was and why professional distance was structural, not optional. None of that. Touched the first 5 seconds. He was already looking at her when she walked in. He didn't stand, not immediately. Then something moved through his body before his face acknowledged it, and he rose. Not a performance, a reflex. Dark suit, no tie. The kind of stillness that didn't come from calm, but from discipline. The room arranged itself around him without being asked. Ms. Asante, he said. Mr. Shin? He gestured toward the chair beside his. She chose the one directly across the table. Something moved through his expression, the very beginning of amusement. Here and gone in under a second. Soo-yeon did not waste time. Whoever built this financial trail is not an amateur. The vendor account is real, it has transaction history, and the authorization signatures are close enough to yours to pass preliminary review. She set down her glasses. This is professional work. They used my employee ID, my access codes. Someone with access to your system profile. Soo-yeon looked at Jae-won. The financial architect. How long to find them? I already have a name, Jae-won said. The room went still. A contractor, 3 shell entities. He's built trails like this twice before in 4 years. Careful, but he has a pattern. A pause. David Price, Bethesda. How long have you known? Since yesterday evening. Before this meeting. Yes. He turned to Zola then. The full weight of it different from what she expected. Not predatory, attentive, like she was the most important variable in the room. You should know everything I know as I know it. That's how this works. She held his gaze for a moment, then looked back at the folder. Can we use Price to trace back to Veld? Only if he talks, Soo-yeon said. Right now he's protected by the same machinery that's protected Veld for 4 years. Then we remove the protection. Jae-won said nothing. Something in his expression shifted. A man who has thought 4 steps ahead watching someone arrive at the same place in real time. Soo-yeon opened the second folder. While my team pulled your audit flag, Jae-won's people pulled the original federal disbursement records, 4 years back. She turned it to face Zola. You didn't find a discrepancy in the margins? Zola read the columns. Once, then again, slower. She set the folder down. She had submitted an audit flag on a Tuesday afternoon and gone home and made dinner because that was procedure, and procedure was what she trusted. 3 days later, a man had grabbed her wrist in a stairwell because she had walked to the edge of 4 years of federal fraud and looked over without knowing what she was looking at. He grabbed me because I was about to expose him without even knowing it, she said quietly. Neither of them spoke. I wasn't a threat. I was a witness. She looked up, and he panicked. Yes, Soo-yeon said. Something settled in Zola's face. Not rage, something harder and more precise. The clarity of a woman who has understood the full dimensions of what she walked into and decided, without drama, that she is walking out the other side. We build the case around the originals, Soo-yeon said. Your criminal complaint collapses the moment we prove the financial trail was constructed to discredit the person who found the original fraud. You're not the embezzler. A pause. You're the whistleblower they tried to bury. Can we get there before the federal filing moves forward? Narrow window. Soo-yeon looked at Jae-won. Price? I can make staying in this arrangement significantly more expensive than leaving it. How? Zola asked. A conversation with the people protecting his business interests. After that conversation, protecting Price costs more than they're willing to spend. A pause. He won't run. He'll go quiet, withdraw, become unavailable. Veld loses his architect and can't rebuild in time. You've done this before? I've removed obstacles, he said. That's what I do. Precise. Exactly enough. Not one word more. She found this, against her better judgment, more honest than elaboration. One more thing, Soo-yeon said. Third folder. One of the research assistants from the stairwell landing, Kezia Adu, has been offered a fully funded fellowship in London. Immediate start. She paused. If she leaves before the hearing, we lose our direct witness. Zola was already reaching for her phone. I'll go to her. She won't respond to legal pressure. She'll respond to me. 8 months in my department. She knows who I am. She stood. I'll go today. At the door, Jae-won spoke. Ms. Asante. She turned. The fellowship offer, he said. I'll look into where it originated. She held his gaze. Do that. When the elevator closed, Soo-yeon looked at Jae-won. The fellowship is gone by end of day. Not a question. It was gone this morning. Before the meeting. Yes. Soo-yeon polished her glasses. Put them back on. She's going to figure out the timeline. I know. And when she does, Jae-won looked at the door Zola had walked through. Underneath the precision of his expression, something that had no name yet but was taking up space. She'll handle it, he said. She handles everything. Soo-yeon looked at him for a long moment. The expression of a woman who had known this man for 11 years and was seeing something she had not seen before. She went back to her folders. Kezia answered the door like someone who had been expecting and dreading the knock. I'm not here to pressure you, Zola said before she could speak. I'm here because I know what you saw, and I know exactly how much courage it took to stay silent when that felt like the only safe option. Kezia's hands tightened on the door. Come in. They came here, Kezia said, with a folder. My visa status, my rent history. A pause. My mother's address in Accra. And then the fellowship offer. It felt like a door. They showed me the wall first. Her voice was cracking at the edges. I'm not a coward. I know you're not. I'm just one person. Kezia. Zola leaned forward. What Veld did to me is one part of something much larger. 4 years of federal fraud. Millions of dollars. If this case collapses because witnesses disappear, he walks away from all of it, and the people who helped him bury it go right back to helping him. Kezia was very still. The fellowship? Look at it closely before you decide. Who funded it? Whether the institution is what it says it is. Something shifted in Kezia's expression. I called the foundation yesterday. The number rang out. No voicemail. A pause. The website was registered 2 months ago. Quiet. Kezia looked at her hands, the window, back at Zola. What do you need from me? What you saw? Written down, dated, signed. We handle everything else. One nod. The nod of someone who has made a decision and closed the door on the alternative. Okay, she said. Zola texted from the parking lot. She's with us. 30 seconds. I know. You. Already killed the fellowship. Before I even came here. A longer pause. Yes. She stared at the screen. He had moved before she asked, removed the threat, told her about the threat, and let her choose to come. Let her be the one Kezia opened the door for. You could have told me. You needed to go yourself. She needed you to come, not me. She started the car. Something had shifted in the careful architecture she had been maintaining around this arrangement. Something small, structural. And she realized, beginning to look. But what Zola doesn't know yet is that Jae-won isn't done, because removing Price and killing a fellowship is management. What he's about to do to Roland Veld is something else entirely. There is a meeting nobody knows is coming. No lawyers, no intermediaries, no record of any kind. Just Shin Jae-won in a room with a man who thought his walls were solid. And when that door closes, Roland Veld is going to understand for the first time exactly what kind of mistake he made. Veld's assistant put the meeting on his calendar as a private donor consultation. Veld walked in expecting endowment contributions. He found Shin Jae-won already seated at the small conference table in his own private office, alone. The door closed behind Veld before he fully registered what he was looking at. Jae-won did not stand, did not extend a hand, simply looked at Veld with the particular quality of attention that had nothing welcoming in it, and waited. Who are you? Veld said. How did you get in here? Sit down, Dr. Veld. Completely quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't need volume because it had already decided what the room was going to do. Veld stood for 3 full seconds, running the calculation, measuring the angles. Then he sat down. Jae-won reached into his jacket. He placed 3 items on the table, one at a time, unhurried. First, a photograph, 8 by 10. A young woman on a university campus laughing at something outside the frame. Time-stamped. That morning. 7:42 a.m. Veld looked at it. His face changed. That's your daughter, Jae-won said. 3rd year, University of Vermont. Same route every morning. Same coffee cart. A pause. She has her mother's laugh. The color left Veld's face. Second, a document. 14 pages, 4 years of federal grant disbursements with every falsified authorization highlighted in yellow. The vendor accounts, the shell routing, the total at the bottom of the last page. Third, an index card. 1 name, 1 address. David Price. A street in Bethesda. He's very good, Jae-won said. Your architect. The trail would have held up long enough to matter. A pause. It won't hold up now. Something moved behind Veld's eyes. Fear. And underneath the fear, the calculus of a man trying to locate the leverage. I don't know what you think you know, he started. Everything, Jae-won said. The word sitting in the room with the weight of something that didn't require elaboration. Veld's mouth closed. The Meridian Project, the Holloway Cycle, the Delaware LLC you set up in 2021. $2,840,000 over 48 months. Redirected an amount small enough to stay below audit threshold. He paused. The woman whose credentials you used most recently found the edge of it on a Tuesday afternoon doing her job, and you put your hands on her in a stairwell. The room was absolutely silent. She is going to walk back into this institute, Jae-won said. The criminal complaint against her is going to collapse. The case she and her attorney are building is going to proceed, and you are going to sit in that hearing room and say nothing useful to anyone. Veld's hands were flat on the table, not entirely steady. If I fight this, then the photograph is the least of what I know about your daughter's daily routine. No inflection. No threat dressed as suggestion, just a statement of fact from a man who had already made peace with every possible response. Veld sat very still. He understood power. He had built his entire career on understanding it. Who owed what to whom, which conversations happened in which rooms. He had survived audits and board reviews and 2 previous complaints that had, quietly, gone away. But this was something different. Something with no committee to answer to. No board to manage. No institutional reputation to protect. Something that had already been inside his calendar, his building, his private office. His hands were shaking. He was not a man who shook easily. Jae-won stood, left the 3 items on the table, the way you leave something for a person to sit with after you've gone. The woman you put your hands on, he said quietly. She found your fraud by accident. She reported it because that's who she is. He paused. Think carefully about what it means that someone like her is the person you chose to make an enemy of. He walked out. Behind him, Roland Veld sat, alone with 3 items on the table, and did not move for 11 minutes. The call started that evening. His lawyer, 42 minutes. Then Harrison, the board contact who had buffered Veld from scrutiny for 4 years. Harrison's call lasted 6 minutes. By morning, he'd requested temporary leave citing health concerns. 3 days later, Kaplan, who had quietly redirected 2 previous complaints against Veld, resigned. No explanation, effective immediately. Veld's lawyer kept working. But he knew, and knowing changed everything. Zola noticed on day 10. Garrett's team sent a revised discovery request, Soo-yeon said without looking up. Significantly narrower. 3 weeks ago they wanted everything. This morning they're asking for current employment records and the audit flag only. They're pulling back. Someone calculated the aggressive approach carries more exposure than it's worth. Harrison, Kaplan, both gone in the same week. Zola looked at Soo-yeon. That's not coincidence. No, Soo-yeon said. It isn't. She texted Jae-won that evening. Something changed on their side. Keep preparing. You met with Veld. A longer pause. Yes. What did you say to him? What needed to be said? Then, he won't be a problem at the hearing. She stood with her hands flat on the kitchen counter. She understood the language. Not a threat of violence, something more precise. The message wasn't, I will hurt what you love. It was, I know exactly where everything you love exists, and you will spend the rest of your life knowing that I know. That was worse. The photograph. Was it of someone he loves? Yes. She put the phone face down, went back to her documents. 4 days before the hearing, Nadia called. Zola was running the mall at 6 a.m, city pale and cold around her. She said Shin Jae-won walked into Veld's private office last week, alone. Nobody knows how he got in. A beat. She said Veld hasn't been the same since. Don't repeat that to anyone, Zola said. Not your supervisor, not your husband. Nobody. She hung up, ran another quarter mile, slowed at a bench near the reflecting pool. She had told Soo-yeon she was going in with full information. She had said it like a woman certain she understood what that meant. She was understanding it differently now, not with fear. She searched for fear and did not find it, which was its own kind of information. What she found was the steadiness of a person who has stopped pretending they are accepting help from a safe distance and has acknowledged, quietly, that they are in something. She started running again. The night before the hearing, her phone rang at 11:15. You should sleep, he said. So should you. I don't sleep much. The way people said things that were true and cost something small to say. Where are you? Nearby. Something shifted in her chest. Not alarming. The opposite. Why? A pause. The hearing is tomorrow. I wanted to be... He stopped. Available. You could have just said that. I just did. Are you afraid? He asked. I'm afraid of what happens if we win and people act like it's over. Like one case fixes what it represents. She paused. And I'm afraid of what happens if we lose and I have to figure out what I'm worth in a world that just told me I'm not worth the truth. The silence on his end was full, like he was holding the words and feeling their weight. You are worth considerably more than the truth, he said quietly. The truth is just where we're starting. The words landed with the weight of something she had been waiting a long time to hear, and had not known it until this moment. Jae-won, she said. First time without the formality of his surname. The intimacy arrived in her mouth before she decided to let it. Yes? Low and careful and receiving. He had felt it too. Don't come into the hearing. I need to do this part on my own. I know. But, she breathed, stay nearby. I already am. Good night, she said. Good night. She slept. 3 blocks away, in the back of a parked car with a view of her building, Shin Jae-won sat with his phone face down on his knee and looked at nothing. His man in the front seat kept his eyes on the street and his mouth closed. He had worked with Jae-won for 7 years. He knew the specific quality of this silence. It was not calculation, not strategy, not the cold focus that preceded a difficult decision. It was something else entirely, something he had never heard from him before. Outside, Washington went about its late-night business, and in a building 3 blocks away, for the first time in 3 weeks, Zola Asante slept without waking. Tomorrow, the hearing. Tomorrow, the room where everything Veld had built against her would either hold or collapse. Tomorrow, Shin Jae-won would sit in a coffee shop across the street with his phone face down and wait. Because she had asked him to stay nearby. And there was nothing in the world right now that was going to move him. The federal building on Pennsylvania Avenue did not care about the weight of what happened inside it. It had processed 10,000 significant things, and remembered none of them. Zola arrived at 7:58. She stood on the steps for exactly 4 seconds. Then she walked in. Soo-yeon was already in the corridor, reading glasses on, leather folder under one arm. She looked at Zola once, the look of a surgeon checking a patient's eyes before the procedure. How are you? Ready? Good. Whatever Garrett says in there, you do not react. You do not lean forward. You do not let your jaw tighten. You sit like a woman who already knows the outcome. Do we already know the outcome? We know the evidence. The outcome follows the evidence. A pause? Usually. She pushed open the door. The hearing room was smaller than Zola expected. 3 hearing officers at the panel table. A gallery of 30. Lawyers, assistants, journalists. Nadia in the second row in a blazer. That said, I am here professionally and will not be removed. Veld was already seated at the opposing table. Still composed at the surface, still silver-haired, but something structural had changed. The confidence that had made him grab her wrist like she was furniture had been replaced by something tighter. The confidence of a man performing confidence rather than having it. Garrett beside him. The stillness of a man who had reviewed his notes enough times that he had stopped trusting them. Zola sat, hands flat on the table, face exactly as instructed. Director Haynes called the proceeding to order, read the matter into the record, looked at Garrett when she said without theatrics. Garrett went first. He was good, measured, fluent, eye contact distributed across the panel like something carefully budgeted. A decorated researcher, a hostile employee, a criminal complaint backed by 14 months of records. A conspiracy, he used the word 3 times between a disgruntled employee and an outside party with a known criminal history. He did not say Shin Jae-won's name. He didn't need to. Director Haynes made a note. Zola kept her hands flat on the table. Then Soo-yeon stood up. She didn't begin immediately. She looked at the panel with the expression of a woman who had spent 30 years watching rooms like this one make decisions, and had a precise understanding of what it took to change the direction of one. Dr. Veld has 30 years of institutional history. We do not dispute that. What we will demonstrate is that when a member of his own staff accidentally found the financial evidence of a pattern he had been running for 4 years, he did not call a meeting. He did not notify compliance. She paused. He followed her into a stairwell. He grabbed her wrist and drove her into a wall. And then he spent 3 weeks building a federal criminal case out of forged documents to make sure she couldn't tell anyone what she found. The room was very still. Today's evidence will establish 3 things. The assault occurred exactly as described, witnessed, and recorded. The financial trail used to support the criminal complaint was fabricated by a contractor hired specifically for that purpose. And the federal grant fraud Ms. Asante's routine audit inadvertently uncovered has been running for 4 years, predates her employment by 2 years, and totals approximately $2.8 million. She put her glasses on. We'll begin with the stairwell. The footage ran for 41 seconds. Nobody spoke during it. Veld's hand shooting out, the grip, the rotation, her shoulder hitting the wall, his face 6 inches from hers. The 2 research assistants on the landing above going deliberately, visibly still. Then Zola straightening her blazer, walking back through the door. Garrett challenged the chain of custody. Soo-yeon directed him to tab 3 of the discovery packet without standing up. Director Haynes admitted the footage and told Garrett to proceed. He sat. Kezia Adu took the witness chair at 10:45, 26 years old, straight-backed, hands folded. The careful steadiness of someone who had made a decision and closed every door on the alternative. She told all of it. The landing. Veld's hand, Zola's face, the silence after. The folder delivered to her apartment. Visa status, rent history, her mother's address in Accra, the fellowship offer, the phone number that rang out, the website registered 2 months ago. Her voice shook on the part about her mother's address and steadied on everything after. Garrett cross-examined for 22 minutes, relentless, looking for a crack and finding the surface frustratingly solid. Kezia answered every question, clearly, without being shaken. When Garrett sat down, Director Haynes looked at Kezia. "Thank you," she said. Not formulaic, something more than that. In the gallery, Nadia pressed her lips together and looked at the ceiling. The financial. Records took an hour. Soo-yeon walked through all of it, the 4-year pattern, the shell vendors, Zola's credentials used without her knowledge, the aggregate total, the timeline proving the fraud predated Zola's employment by 2 years. Then placed beside it Veld's criminal complaint, each element built specifically to mirror and discredit the original fraud. Not coincidence. A deliberate construction. Garrett objected 11 times. Was overruled 11 times. By the time Soo-yeon sat down, Director Haynes had filled 4 pages of notes. Veld's hands were flat on the table, not entirely steady. Garrett's closing used every angle he had left. When he sat down, Veld leaned toward him and said something urgent. Garrett looked at the table, shook his head once. Soo-yeon's closing lasted 12 minutes. She didn't raise her voice once. She reminded the panel of the footage, the testimony, the 4-year fraud, the fabricated complaint, the 2 board members who had vanished before, the hearing, the settlement offered 48 hours after the assault with an NDA designed to silence the one person who had accidentally found everything. Ms. Asante did not come here looking for a prize. She came because she was assaulted by a man who believed his position made her safe to assault, and when that wasn't enough, he tried to put her in prison. She looked at the panel. We are asking you to look at all of it and tell the truth about what you see. She sat down. Director Haynes conferred briefly with the 2 flanking officers, looked back at the room. We'll deliberate and return before end of session. We're recessed. Zola stood near the corridor window. Nadia beside her, not speaking, just present in the solid, continuous way that was Nadia's specific form of love. Soo-yeon appeared. You did well. You did the work. You sat in that room for 4 hours and gave them nothing to use against you. That takes discipline. A pause. How are you? Ask me when we have the ruling. 2 blocks away, in a coffee shop on 9th and D, Shin Jae-won sat at a corner table. His coffee had gone cold 40 minutes ago. His man had offered a live feed twice during the recess. He had declined both times. He had done everything he could do. Now it was hers. The deliberation took 58 minutes. When the room reassembled, Zola sat down, put her hands flat on the table, and breathed once from the bottom of her lungs. Nadia had both hands clasped in her lap. Director Haynes looked at the room. The panel finds as follows. Absolute silence. The complaint filed against Ms. Zola Asante is dismissed in its entirety. The financial documentation submitted in support of the criminal complaint has been determined to be fabricated. A pause. Ms. Asante is reinstated as Director of Clinical Operations, effective immediately, with full back pay. Zola's hands stayed flat on the table. Dr. Roland Veld is suspended pending full federal investigation. The financial documentation is referred to the Federal Oversight Committee. The Institute's board is cited for failure to investigate the original complaint and for procedural irregularities in the handling of security footage. Director Haynes set the document down. This proceeding is closed. The gavel came down. For 1 second, the room did nothing. Then Nadia made a sound in the gallery that was not entirely professional and did not apologize for itself. Soo-yeon set her pen down with the precise care of a woman putting something down she had been holding for a very long time. Zola sat very still, her hands still flat, her face still composed. The habit of not breaking did not immediately release just because it had been vindicated. Zola, Soo-yeon said quietly. I know, she said. I know. She stood up. Nadia pushed through the railing and grabbed her with both arms and held on with the force of someone who had been holding that hug in reserve for 6 weeks. Zola held on back, eyes closed. For the first time since a stairwell door had swung shut and a man's hand had locked around her wrist, something in her chest unclenched fully and completely. She let it. She texted from the courthouse steps. It's done. I know. Go celebrate. 10 seconds later, you were right about Kezia. She read those 6 words, and the smile came properly. Real and unmanaged and entirely hers. She looked up across Pennsylvania Avenue. The coffee shop on the corner. A figure at the window. She raised her hand. He raised his. Nadia squinted. Who is that? Someone who was here the whole time. Nadia opened her mouth. Don't, Zola said. I'm not saying anything. Good. Just observing. Nadia. Observing silently. The press statement happened 40 minutes later. She spoke without notes. She said what happened to her was not exceptional. The machine that protected Roland Veld was not unique to this institute. The research assistants who went silent were not cowards. They were people who understood the cost of visibility and made a rational calculation about survival. The system that made that calculation rational was the problem. She said she was going back to work, not as a symbol. As the director of clinical operations who had a backlog to clear, that was enough. In the coffee shop, Jae-won watched the statement on his phone until it ended, then put his phone away, picked up his cold coffee, set it back down. Good news? His man said. He looked at the steps where she had been standing. Yes. That was all. She came to him an hour later. After the interviews, after Soo-yeon, after Nadia's photographs and her mother's voice on the phone saying everything mothers say when something terrible has resolved into something survivable. She crossed the street and walked into the coffee shop, and he stood when she walked in, the same reflex. And this time she didn't analyze it. She just sat down across from him. You watched the statement. All of it. What did you think? You said exactly what needed to be said and nothing extra. A pause. I think Soo-yeon was trying not to cry. Soo-yeon doesn't cry. She was trying very hard not to. Thank you, she said quietly, meaning all of it. The footage and the lawyer and the board members and the car parked 3 blocks from her building and the hand in the window across 4 lanes of traffic. All of it. You would have found another way, he said. Maybe. She held his gaze. This way was better. Something moved through his expression, warm and surprised, and quickly managed. She let him sit with it. Price, can he come back? No infrastructure left. He's just a man in Bethesda now. And Veld? Federal proceedings for 2 years. He has nothing left for anything else. She looked at him. You sat across from him. Put something on the table. He didn't confirm or deny. Just looked at her with the steadiness of a man who had decided what he would and would not explain. Was it enough? Yes. How do you know? Because I know what fear looks like on a man who has never had reason to feel it. A pause. And because he sat there for 11 minutes after I left and didn't make a single call. She was quiet for a moment. The orbit was not what she had expected. Not comfortable, not safe in the usual sense, but not wrong. She reached across the table, not for his hand. She picked up his coffee cup, looked at it, set it back down. This is cold. I know. How long have you been here? Since 8:30. She stared at him. The hearing started at 9. Yes. Something in her chest did something she chose, for now, not to name. Let me buy you a coffee, she said. A warm one. The warmth under the architecture, contained and real, and his. All right, he said. Outside, Washington carried on, indifferent and ordinary and continuous. Inside, neither of them was waiting for the next thing to go wrong. They were just here, in the warm noise of an ordinary afternoon. Beginning something. The Institute lobby looked exactly the same. Zola had expected it to feel different, expected the building to carry some residue of what had happened inside it. The weight of a stairwell, a fabricated file, 6 weeks of a machine trying to make her disappear. Instead, she felt her badge work on the first tap. She rode the elevator to the 4th floor. Her desk was exactly as she had left it. Her files, her calendar. The small framed photograph of her mother's clinic in Accra that she had put there on her first day and never moved. She sat down, opened her email, 412 unread messages. She started at the top. Her team came by in ones and twos with actual work, questions, updates, things held in suspension for 6 weeks. She cleared 3 backlogs before noon, caught a budget error at the 2 o'clock review and corrected it without making it a thing. At 4:30, Derek, who had sent her one text during the entire 6 weeks that said only we need, you back and never mentioned it again, appeared in her doorway with a coffee and set it on her desk without a word. Thank you, Derek. Welcome back, Director Asante. She drank the coffee, called Jae-won from her car that evening. How was it? He asked. Ordinary. Fixed a budget error. 400 emails. Derek brought coffee without being asked. She paused. It was exactly what I needed it to be. Ordinary. Yes? She leaned back against the seat. I've been fighting for ordinary for 6 weeks. I forgot that's what I was fighting for. A pause. You should eat something. I did eat something. At your desk. How do you... She stopped. You have someone in the building. I have someone everywhere. Tell your person my dietary habits are not a security concern. Something in the silence told her he was almost smiling. I'll pass that along. She drove home, made real dinner at her actual table with the window open, ate slowly, tasted all of it, the best meal she'd had in 6 weeks. Veld's federal proceedings began 31 days after the hearing. Soo-yeon sent updates when they mattered. Price cooperated fully. 2 board members followed. The machine did, late and imperfectly, what it was supposed to do. Zola read each update once, moved forward. She had already done her part. The thing between her and Jae-won built the way things built between 2 careful people. In accumulated evenings, in phone calls that started about specific things and became about everything. He appeared at her door one Saturday in November, with no explanation except that he was in the neighborhood. She let him in, made coffee. They sat in her kitchen for 2 hours, talking about nothing that required a stairwell or a federal building. She found this terrifying and did not look away from it. 3 weeks after her first day back, he sent a package to her office. No note. A first edition. Medical Ethics. A text she had mentioned once in passing, the way you mentioned things you wanted without meaning to want them out loud. She had not thought he was listening for that. You were paying attention. His response? I'm always paying attention. She set the book next to her mother's photograph and did not move it. 6 weeks after the hearing, at his apartment, she told him she was still afraid. He was right there, closer than she'd calibrated. Neither of them moved. I'm still not done being afraid of this, she said. Not the case, not what he was, not the orbit. This. I know, he said. So am I. You're afraid. Of this. Of losing it, he said. There's a difference. She reached up and put her palm against his jaw, felt the way his breath changed. One slow, controlled inhale, barely managed, the most honest thing she had seen from him. He turned his face slightly into her hand, eyes closed. Earn it, she said quietly. He covered her hand with his, and he kissed her, not rushed, the way he did everything, decided, certain, like a door he had been standing outside of for a long time and had finally, deliberately, opened. She felt the distinction in her whole body, the difference between being handled and being held, between a man who reached because he could and a man who reached because he was choosing to. She chose back, equally, fully. Afterward, she lay against his chest in the quiet. His hand moved slowly through her hair. I'm still not done being afraid, she said to the ceiling. Neither am I. His voice was lower, less managed. Good, she said. Outside, the city hummed on. Inside, something settled that had not been settled before. The dinner was 3 weeks later. Georgetown. Small, warm, a room that didn't perform itself. He told her about coming to this country at 19. The specific fury that built his empire, not ambition. Fury. The decision at 23 that shaped the next 15 years, what he could justify and what he couldn't. That he had stopped pretending he didn't know the difference. She told him about her mother's clinic, about watching brilliant, invisible women build rooms with their hands and receive nothing, about swallowing things for years because the work mattered, about a stairwell and a bruised wrist, and deciding she was done. Your mother, he said. What did she say? Zola smiled. She said God didn't bring me this far to let a man with a God complex and a forensic accountant take me down. A pause. Then she said I should eat more. Something broke open in his face. He laughed. The real one. Low and surprised, and out of him without permission. She had been waiting for it without knowing. Don't apologize, she said before he could. Do it more. They closed the restaurant. On the corner outside, he said one word. Soul. Just that, standing between them like a question waiting for the right moment. Is this the part where you ask me? This is the part where I ask you. Everything in his face settled and deliberate. Come to Seoul with me. And everything that comes with it. We negotiate, all of it. Nothing on my terms that isn't also on yours. A pause. That's what I'm offering. She thought about a parking structure and a bruised wrist. A phone call from an unknown number. Cold coffee and a hand in a window across 4 lanes of traffic. A first edition on her desk. She took his hand. Yes, she said. Soul. His hand closed around hers. Not tight, just certain. Seoul in March was cold and bright and enormous. The city moved differently around him. Doors opened. Rooms arranged themselves. She watched all of it and did not look away. On the 3rd evening, he took her to a room that mattered before anyone told her it did. The real infrastructure of his world, not the donor version. She walked in and felt every eye make its calculation. She stood straight, met every gaze without performance, simply present, which was its own statement. A man approached, older, significant. He spoke Korean. Eyes on Zola. Jae-won answered without looking away from her. The older man studied her, then said in precise English, "He says you are not what he expected." What did he expect? Someone easier. Then he should have chosen someone easier. The man laughed, short, genuine, said something to Jae-won, then moved away. What did he say? Zola asked. He said you'll do. High praise? Jae-won looked at her, the warmth under the architecture, present and unconstrained. She found him at the window later, the Han River below, vast and lit. You held that room, he said. The room held itself. I didn't get in the way. He was quiet. You shouldn't have had to spend your whole career learning to stand still while rooms decide what you're worth. No, but I did, and it made me someone who doesn't flinch when your people take a look. She paused. So there's that. He looked at her for a long time. Zola, he said. Just her name. She turned. He brought his hands to her face. Both of them, the way he had in his apartment, with the city burning below, careful and asking and decided. This started because someone grabbed my wrist, she said. No, he said. It started because he picked the wrong woman to threaten. We, she said. Everything in his face open. The warmth he had spent years containing, unmanaged and real. We, he said, and then he kissed her, overlooking the Han River with his world behind them and the city enormous below. Both of them still. Both of them arrived. 6 months later, Zola returned to the Institute's annual gala as Director of Clinical Operations, keynote speaker, and the woman whose name was attached to a new federal oversight initiative requiring mandatory ethics reporting across all federally funded research institutions. Midnight blue dress, hair loose. She stood at the podium and spoke without notes to a room that included people who had been there the night a man followed her into a stairwell. She spoke about what had changed and what hadn't, about women still, swallowing things in hallways without cameras, about the work that remained. She did not ask permission to take up space. Her phone buzzed afterward. You were extraordinary. You watched the live stream from Seoul. Yes, you're supposed to be in meetings. I am in meetings. This is also a meeting. She laughed out loud in the empty corridor. Come home. A longer pause than usual, already on the way. She walked back into the gala, back to the work, back to the ordinary, extraordinary life of a woman who had decided in a parking structure, with a bruised wrist, that she was not going to disappear quietly. She never did. Somewhere above the Pacific, Shin Jae-won looked out a plane window at an ocean that did not care about any of it. For the first time in 15 years, he was not calculating what came next. He was just going home. She chose not to disappear. He chose to stay. Everything else followed. If this story held you from that first stairwell to the last window, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to see a woman win completely. The next story is already on its way. Stay with us.